Yeah, well, we got kicked off, but we're back again. I've had that happen once before, I think, in all the time we've been doing that. Look, if you want to join our Remote AF community, jump onto remoteaf.co, hit the community button, join us there. There's a lot of like-minded people talking about all kinds of stuff. But my guest today here at Out Talking Remote, the fantastic Jeff Gothelf. How are you today?
I'm great, Tony. Nice to see you again, and it's good to be here.
Yes, it's fantastic to have a fellow brother of the hair, as I call you.
I hope we don't blind folks with the reflections coming. I've got these lights, in my home studio here. It's like I'm just trying to minimize
it's a reflection of the mental processes that are.
That's right. It's brilliance. It's literal brilliance, just shining through the camera.
Well, let's dazzle them with some of that brilliance. So, the title of today's cast was OKRs are not just another trendy business framework, which was I believe it was a talk you gave, and it caught my attention. And Jeff, we've had you on all the remote things before, so it's fantastic to get you on here and talk about that. Because, and the reason that it struck a chord with me is I've been working with a lot of organisations, and organisations are struggling. They think that OKRs are new. They think they're this trendy buzzword. Talk to me about your thoughts on that.
Look, here's the interesting thing, right? So OKRs isn't new in the sense that it's been around 40 years at least. Kind of spawned originally by Andy Grove at Intel 40 years ago. I think the fundamental difference. Well, I think there's a couple of things that kind of have made it much more popular and have shown the spotlight on it recently. I think, first of all, John Doerr did us some favors with Measure What Matters, also did us some disfavors with that book. We can talk about that as well. But at the very least, brought the idea to sort of to the forefront. Hey, Google does it, so should you, type of thing. And I think there's a lot of that in the world, right? I mean, I think this company's still talking about doing the Spotify model when it comes to Agile, right? Even though Spotify doesn't do the Spotify model anymore. But point is that so John Doerr kind of brought it forward, I think, a few years ago with that book, which we're grateful for. I think the other thing that has made it more popular these days, the other things, I think number one is the ability for us to learn more quickly as companies, as organizations. Not to say that everybody takes advantage of that, but because we can learn very, very quickly today whether or not we're delivering something of value. The value of OKRs, of objectives and key results, and we'll get into the specifics of it, it can be realized much more quickly. I think that's really important. And then what I'd like to believe, and I don't have exact proof of this yet, even though this is something that I promote with the clients that I work with, I would like to believe that in their quest for increased agility, organizations are recognizing that if you use OKRs as a goal-setting framework, they actually set a solid foundation for that agility. And so without having to force it as much as they have perhaps in the past. And so I think that's why we're seeing a big focus on this. And the similar kind of, and we can touch on this as well, a similar kind of backlash that we've seen with the Agile and Scrum and all those other frameworks that have come around as well, because I think a lot of folks are now rushing to do it, doing it poorly, and their folks are getting burned on it, and they're like, nah, I don't like this.
Let me pick you up on something you just said. So you said it was a goal-setting framework, not a measurement framework, and also
Correct.
I'll just go a little bit back to the John Doerr Measure What Matters, and you said he'd done us some favors, but some disservices in that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what you were thinking there.
Sure. So look, the favors are with the success of that book, he made the concept obvious and prevalent and present in leadership conversations, right? Every CEO and executive has that book on their desk. Did they read it? Did they read the whole thing? Debatable, right? But the bottom line is the concept exists because of that book. And that's great, because we have to examine our approaches to goal setting if we want to survive in this world of continuous change and risk and uncertainty and geopolitical instability and pandemics, you name it, right? So I think that's the favor that book has done us. The disfavor is that I think, well, I believe. Let's go with that. Okay. I believe, I'm trying to find the right word here I believe that the framework is more effective if you are more strict with the definition of the key results, of the objectives and the key results, than Doerr was in his book. In his book, let's get specific. In his book, Doerr is very comfortable with objectives that are not necessarily qualitative. They can be more sort of project-based.
Yes. And
key results that are focused on outputs. That's not to say that that's the only thing he promotes, but he is comfortable with this concept that says, let's build a better, let's build a faster checkout process, and we'll do that by shipping the mobile, the QR code purchase flow by the end of the year. In my opinion, the efficacy of objectives and key results is neutered heavily when you approach them this way. And in the work that I do and in the book that we're writing about this, we are very, very strict about the fact that your objective is a qualitative goal. It's an aspirational goal. We want to become the most effective way to find furniture online in Europe, right, by the end of the year, something like that. And that your key results are outcomes. They are measures of human behavior that deliver business results. And so in the entire OKR statement, there is no solution. And if you treat this goal setting framework that way, it lays that foundation for agility, because the goal isn't make me a thing. The goal is positively impact the behavior of the humans that we serve. Right. And when you give that goal to a team, or a team sets that goal for itself, ideally, they then have to go and discover the best combination of code, copy, design that delivers that behavior change. And as they're working, if they realize that what they're working on isn't driving that behavior change, they now have the evidence to change course. And changing course based on evidence is being agile. Right. So to me, that's kind of like the relatively short summary of where I think that book does us some services, disservices, and why.
And the reason I picked you up on goal setting along with that, because it often gets called a measurement framework. I hear that so many times. And the other thing that I hear and see is that it gets aligned to, so let's use an agile process, for example, all right, but it could be anything. But, you got your features and your epics, and people are actually aligning the objective to the epic and the key results to that epic, and saying you will deliver that epic as an objective, as a key results, and these are the key results. And I can see your face there, right? But yeah, we're seeing that happen. And one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here was to help, stop doing that.
Exactly. My advice is to stop doing that. Look, it's a super common anti-pattern, right? Why is it a common anti-pattern? Well, because we've negotiated this work, and we've committed to it, and we've done the iteration planning, and we've prioritized, and we've done the tug of war of like, I want this and I want that, and you can have a little bit more of that, a little bit less of this. And then like, oh crap, you changed the goal on us? Well, let's just figure out then how to make what we've already agreed to the goal, right? And so it's super common, and I get it. You don't want to feel like you wasted your time doing those planning and negotiation exercises. But the reality is that this is an anti-pattern, and it defeats the purpose of this, right? This is not a measurement system. It's a goal-setting framework, and I think that, and the reason is because, look, we work. If you're building digital products and services, you're building on top of continuous systems, right? You're not shipping software in a box like we used to when we had hair, Tony.
Well, that's a long time
You
ago.
right? Um, it does. That's when software came in a box. When I had hair, right? And look, and in that world, software software was static, right? And so there was that linear waterfall process of we got to build, ship, wait, and then do it all again, right? We don't have to do that today, right? And so we build on top of continuous systems. Now, the benefit of these continuous systems is that we can deliver ideas into the hands of customers as fast as we want. Literally, as fast as we want. Like at the extreme edge of things is Amazon, right? Who are always at the extreme edge of this stuff. They ship code to production every second, once a second, right? In that world, the delivery of features is a non-event, right? It's literally a non-event because over there it happens 60 times a minute. But even in your world where if it happens once an hour, once a day, once a week, once a sprint, whatever, right? The delivery of software more or less has become a non-event. And so measuring that as a goal doesn't make sense, number one. Number two, we have, as I mentioned a second ago, we have infinite choices about what to make, how to design it, how to build it, how to ship it, what channels to use, what to call it, what to price it, how to chart, like everything, right? Which way is the best way, right? We don't know, right? There are people in your company that think they know, right? But more likely there are people in your company who have very good educated guesses, assumptions, hypotheses about how to do this. The only way to truly determine the most effective way of solving a customer problem is to measure their behavior, right? What are people doing today? And when we succeed in solving that problem, what will they be doing differently, right? So we're going to reduce the number of people who call customer service to reset their password by 90%, right? Because today we're seeing too many calls and that costs us $15 a call, whatever. We're going to ensure that we see a 25% increase in the number of folks who put something in their shopping cart and complete the purchase process. Because today we've got to drop off significantly in that process, right? Those are the goals. And these continuous systems that we work on top of give us that opportunity to test and learn, forgive me, to sense and respond. I wrote a book called that, right? But literally how well our ideas are resonating with our target audience. And if they're not resonating, then we stop working on them, right? And therefore, that's where the breakdown is, right? So if you're my boss and I say, boss, we're going to ship the 4-step checkout process, right? And as we start to build and test the 4-step checkout process, we realize that it needs to be a 5-step checkout process. That's going to be more effective, right? I have to come back to you and say, boss, we're not building the 4-step checkout process anymore. But if I'm measured by that, if my job, promotion, raise, performance management is measured on shipping the 4-step process, even though I know a 5-step process is better, I'm going to ship the 4-step process. So that's why this is a fundamentally different way of approaching work, and why it's really difficult for folks, because it conflicts with the way that we are currently managed and incentivized inside organizations.
And I'm seeing a question come through on that. How do we get our leaders to understand it's not something that they use to hold us to account on all the time? It's an interesting balance though, because it's not a case of there's no account, right? But
No.
It's also a case of you might not. So the thing that I see quite regularly in terms of reference to that question is they're holding them to account to finish 100% of key result and getting a 100% result from that key result, rather than that aspirational notion. Your thoughts on that, Jeff?
Look, I think hitting 100% of anything is really hard. It's not impossible in some cases, but I think it's really hard. In fact, I don't even speak in absolutes. You'll hear me sort of couch all of my comments with "in most cases" or "usually."
Oh, but I've got 100% code coverage. No,
yeah, exactly. But no, and so this idea is, look, in these user journeys through our products, we can optimize these user journeys forever. We can.
Yeah.
Literally, because we work on these continuous systems, I can optimize the checkout process in my e-commerce site or the mortgage application process on my website forever. I can just have a team optimizing that forever. At some point, the return on that investment doesn't make sense anymore, right? Like we have gotten, we've gotten 80% submission rates on the mortgage application workflow. We worked another 6 months, we got it to 82%, right? If we work another 6 months, maybe we can squeeze out another percentage point and get it to 83. There's always going to be some folks who fail out of this process. And so there needs to be a realization that there's a good enough aspect here. And good enough isn't strictly tied to the goal that we set 3 or 6 or 9 months ago. It's also tied to the current reality, right? Stuff has changed in the world. I'll give you an example. Let's make this concrete instead of talking in the abstract. Okay, I worked at a job board years ago, and a job board is a two-sided marketplace. You have job seekers and you have employers looking to meet each other. It's like a dating site, basically. We had a behavior that was clearly negatively affecting retention rates, revenue, et cetera. And it was called job seeker response rate. It was the percentage of times that a job seeker responded to an employer communication through our system. And it was 14%, which is abysmal when you've got two parties paying to play in the same system. And we knew that was a leading indicator for retention rates and ultimately revenue, customer satisfaction, recommendations, all that stuff was kind of driven off of this. So we put a team together. I was on that team, and we said, and we were told, look, your job is to raise the job seeker response rate from 14% to 75%. That was literally the goal assigned to that team. No one told us what to make. No one told us how to get there. Everything was open to us. And so we spent a quarter running some experiments, testing out some ideas, shipping some features. And in 3 months, we raised the job seeker response rate from 14% to the high 30s, 37, 38%. Came back to the organization after 3 months and said, we've been working on this for 3 months. We're 38%. What do you want to do? They said, good work. We see you're making progress. Keep going. Okay. So we worked for another 3 months, did the same thing. And at the end of 6 months, we came back and we had hit 68%. The goal was 75. By the way, the goal was 75 because it was more than 14, right? and 100% was impossible, right? So coming back to that 100% is impossible, right? We hit 68% after 6 months. And we said, what do you want to do? Like, we could keep going and try to get to 75. But given that we were close enough, we're about 75, 80, 85% of the goal, and the new realities, the new priorities for the business 6 months later, the leadership team said, good enough. Let's just maintain it 68, 70% and get you folks over to a new initiative, right? And so it's the decisions that you're making about whether or not to continue working towards the goal. Yes, sure, they're tied to that original goal that you set. But in addition to that, new stuff happens in the world over time, and we need to be able to react to that and say, this isn't as much of a priority anymore as it was 6 months ago. Good work. Now let's get you over to something else.
Oh, I like this question. Can the goal evolve?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Right. Again, and this is exactly what I was saying, right? So, we work with the information we have on hand. We work with historical information, and we make our best guesses about what the goals should be. Let's be super clear about this, right? We are guessing. They're educated guesses. They're smart guesses, I hope, in most cases. But we are absolutely going to make some assumptions about what the most effective goal should be for us and what the most effective behavior changes should be for us. So let's say, for example, we'll stick with this job seeker retention rate example because it's familiar to me and easy. Let's say we began to optimize that goal. And after 3 months, we got it into those high 30s, and the organization was seeing no change in retention rate, revenue, referrals, customer satisfaction. Like, we more than doubled the amount of folks connecting in the system, and there was no other change, right? That's a good conversation to have with the team and say, look, we thought this was a leading indicator to retention and CSAT and recommendations and revenue. Turns out we talked to some customers to understand a bit better why. Doesn't make sense. So we're going to move off of this, and we're going to try a different part of the user journey that we hope will drive retention, revenue, CSAT, et cetera. So absolutely, we need to pause. And look, the time frame that I use is quarters, because it's common and it's less than a year. But whatever time frame works for you that's less than what you're currently doing today is where you pause and you reflect, right? What have we done? What have we learned? Does it still make sense to go in this direction? And if it doesn't, it's not a failure, right? It's a learning, right? We learned that we shouldn't keep doing this. That's an amazing thing, right? Let's spend our money and time elsewhere.
I think that's a really important thing is that the reality of it is that sense of response allows you to pivot and make those decisions, to steal a word from Eric Ries, pivot.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is really important. I want to take this a bit wider though, because we were talking, in the off air, and we're talking about the enterprise view of this as well. So, we have a strategic enterprise way that we're heading, direction, and how do we take that as strategic intent and bring that down through the layers of the organization using OKRs? Because that cascading idea is another one that I hear a lot of people asking questions about. How shouldn't we just set one here and everybody gets that?
No.
I know the answer, but I'm interested, some
Thank
advice on that is always good for people as well.
I like one-word answers. The answer is no. No. I mean, look, here, so let's think about it. So let's be super clear on the relationship, right? OKRs are derived from strategy, not the other way around, right? OKRs do not generate your strategy. They are the goals that you set to help you understand if you are making progress towards your strategy. So there's no abdication of the strategic process here by leadership. They have to do it. Right? Once a strategy is set for an organization, typically, hopefully, some KPIs are set with that strategy, and usually they're very high level: revenue, sales, profit margin, customer satisfaction, right? Those types of things. And so you could argue that is more or less an organizational OKR, right? The next part of the conversation is to ask the business unit leads, the department heads, not discipline heads, but like the business unit or the business department heads, to say, okay, great. What are the OKRs for your business unit that support the organizational goals? So one of them is going to say, well, we're, this is, we're going to build the best mobile, like if it's the mobile department, right? Mobile app department. We're going to build the easiest to use, whatever, mobile application. And here are the customer behaviors we hope to change. And we chose these 3 key results because we know they're leading indicators to revenue and retention and customer satisfaction, right? And so we do that across the board. The next conversation from those business leads, business department leads or business unit leads, is to ask their teams, okay, at your level, within your sphere of influence, right? The part of the customer journey or the experience that you control, what are the goals that you can set that function as leading indicators to the departmental goals, which function as leading indicators to the organizational goals? Let me make this a bit more concrete, again, with examples, because that's kind of abstract. Let's say you work on the authentication team, okay? You're in charge, you and your team are in charge of the authentication process into your application. Okay. If I gave you a revenue goal, you're going to fail, right? There's like, how are you going to know that making the authentication process better drove revenue, right? There's so many steps between signing in and making money that it's literally unfair and unrealistic to give the authentication team a revenue goal. So the authentication team comes up with their own goals, right? We are going to make the smoothest authentication process in the online banking industry. And we'll know that's true when we reduce complaints for password retrieval by 90%. We increase successful authentications on first attempt by 100% and whatever, something else, right? We're looking for those behavior changes. Why did they choose those metrics? Well, they've got to tell a good story about that. We chose those metrics because we know that if we can get folks into the mortgage application process without any complaints, they're much more likely to complete it. Okay, great. So we're a leading indicator to completion of the application process. And, right, when we reduce calls to the call center, we reduce their costs as well, which is a leading indicator to profit margin and cost of operations, et cetera. And so that to me is a much more realistic approach. It's to ask the teams that are doing the work, what behaviors can you control within your sphere of influence that are leading indicators of the departmental goals and then ultimately the organizational goals, right? But we're not signing up for those organizational goals because you're setting those teams up for failure, right? That's just that you can't give revenue or profit margin goals to a data science team or a security team. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think that strategic link is also, you see organizations, do a lot of work on their strategy, quite rightly so, and then they bring the strategy to the people, and it is those areas like pure operational teams, pure sales teams that say, well, how do we link back to that? How does that work for us? And I think that what you've said there really resonates with a lot of them. I'm going to take a bit of a right-hand turn here now. and focus a little bit on your book. So I was talking to you a little bit off air that you've got a new book out there. Let's hear it. What's it about? When are we going to get to see it? And any excerpts that we can hear?
So the book is about OKRs. It's not done yet. We have, I think at this point, we have a complete first draft manuscript. I think that's where we are. I'm pretty sure of that. I have a co-author, it's Josh Seiden, and Josh and I wrote Lean UX together and Sense and Respond. And so it's about OKRs, and it's called Who Does What by How Much. That's the name of the book. There's a subtitle that I can't remember, I'm sorry, but that's the which I know but it's still in flux a little bit, but that's the title, Who Does What by How Much, which is how we teach OKRs. Right. Every time we do OKRs, when we get to the key results portion, that's the question we ask teams to answer. Who does what by how much? The book is designed as the practical implementation guide to OKRs for the entire company. So it's not written exclusively for tech teams or product teams. It's written for the entire organization. So the thought process that we had was the executive team has read Measure What Matters, and then they demand, do OKRs to the team. Great. We don't know how. What book do we get?
Yep.
We get Jeff and Josh's book, Who Does What by How Much? And we give it to everybody because it's super practical and tactical. And it doesn't matter if you're a product manager, a software engineer, a data scientist, a marketer, a finance person, a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, whatever it is. It will help you understand the framework and how your role fits into that. So that's the gist of the book. Currently, we're targeting mid-November for the launch. It's self-publishing, which is, it's a double-edged sword, as they say. The nice part about it is that you can do whatever you want. No one tells you what to do.
Have you said OKRs for yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And the bad part of self-publishing is that you can do whatever you want. No one tells you what to do. So if we don't make it to November 15th, which is 6 weeks away at this point, then it'll be after the new year, just to skip over the holiday noise and get it out like end of January, early Feb, and just make sure it's perfect, or as perfect as it can be. Excerpt wise, I've been basically writing a good chunk of this book in public on my blog every week for the last 2.5 or 3 years. So pretty much, well, I'd say about 90% of the blog posts I've written in the last 2.5 years over on my blog, and I write every Monday, are about OKRs. And so a lot of that content is going into the book. It's the way I've been testing the content and getting it out of my head. And so there isn't an official excerpt yet, but you can read all kinds of ideas from the book on my blog for free.
Which is exactly how I got the title out of this, by the way. So another question that I've got for you that I wanted to go further with now that we've talked a bit about the book and I've been reading some of the things that you published. But so MVP and product driven organizations are still the big buzzword out there, right? Still, we're going to have product teams and we're going to be product led and we're going to be product, which is fine. I'm not dissing on that. But what I'm saying is a lot of people are now saying, okay, well, how do objectives and key results link in with minimum viable product and product led teams where the product managers and the product owners are all aligned against X, but we're trying to do Y to do the best thing possible? Does that make sense?
No.
Okay. So what we see product owners and we see perhaps product managers if you're an archetypal organization, right? And they're lined up against their product roadmap. And they have a very clear product roadmap of where they're going and what they're going to do. But then at the enterprise layer, they've also got their objectives and their key results, and they might have their strategy. And how do the two link in together? And then the teams are caught in that wedge in between that as well, going, well, we want to do the best things possible. How do we link all that together? Does that make more sense?
It does. Look, this is the friction of this way of working. This is where this gets difficult. Honestly, the concept of objectives and key results is really simple. I mean, I've already explained it at least once or twice. It's that fast. Writing a good OKR statement is a little bit harder, but it's certainly not brain surgery. Everybody can do it. It might take a little bit of stretching if you're not used to thinking about your success in terms of human behavior, but we can help you get there. What companies then fail to realize is the impact of changing your goals from output, making a thing, to outcome, changing human behavior, means that everybody has to change their expectations. They have to change their roadmaps. They have to change their predictions and the way that we communicate and what we incentivize and what we celebrate. There has to be a completely different conversation in the organization. And this is why this fails and folks get burned out on this a lot, is because they'll say, okay, I wrote a really good OKR, right? And then you told me to build this thing, or you forced us to put this on the roadmap, and this thing doesn't help us achieve our key results in any way, but you told us to build it. And so now not only have I built a thing that we didn't think we needed to, but I've also not hit my key results because I couldn't do the thing that actually was going to move them forward. And that is very, very common in organizations because it is difficult to change leadership demands and expectations on the teams, regardless of the goal-setting framework that you use.
And I think that's where I was heading with the minimum viable product comment, right? So, they'll have that minimum viable product piece. We're going to do X, but it doesn't align exactly with what you're saying with the teams. They're telling the teams to go deliver this X, but then the teams are trying to do that. So what's, leaning on that, what would you do in terms of that to alleviate that problem? Because you've obviously seen it before, Jeff.
Yeah. Let's assume we're working with a medium-sized to a large-sized organization, okay? The most effective thing that we can do in this situation is to not roll out OKRs to everybody overnight. Instead, this is change. Change is risky. How do we risk change? How do we de-risk change and risk? We run experiments, right? So the same approach that we take to de-risking our products and services, we are going to take to de-risk our processes. So instead of saying, look, we have 1,000 employees, 5,000, whatever, right? We have 1,000 employees. Everybody's doing OKRs on Monday. You're dead in the water. It's it's just going to be, it's like, have you ever seen that photo? I've got a photo on my blog, one blog post. Sweden in like 1970, whatever, switched from driving on the left side of the road to the right side of the road overnight. Like literally, it was like on Sunday we drive on the left, on Monday we drive on the right. And there's a photo of these intersections in Sweden like that Monday morning where it's like just people just smashing into each other. It's chaos, right? That's what you'll see, right? If you're like, hey, 1,000 people, everybody doing OKRs on Monday, it's going to be chaos. Instead, if you took 10 people, one team, and you said, look, we're going to give you an OKR. Let's work on an OKR together. We're going to give you 12 weeks, 1/4, to work towards a strategic initiative that is important, but not mission critical, right? So it needs to be something that is important enough for people to pay attention to and to take seriously. But if you mess it up, like, we're not going to kill the company, right? And you're going to figure out how to work through this process, and you're going to figure out how to communicate what you're doing in this process. And you're inevitably going to bump up against the organizational boundaries where this is no longer comfortable for your colleagues, right? And we're going to figure out how to overcome that. And then at the end of 12 weeks, we're going to take those learnings, and assuming things went relatively well and we want to keep doing this, we're going to expand to 2 teams. And we're going to keep going for another 1/4. And if that goes well, we'll go from 2 to 5 teams, right? And then 5 to 10, and 10 to 50, and 50 to 100, and so forth, right? And so we scale this up with evidence. We invest further with evidence. And we learn sort of how to communicate well across the organization. We learn where there are challenges. Like, a team that's working towards OKRs needs access to customers. It needs access to data and analytics. It needs to know how to do product discovery. If those things become challenges for the pilot team or teams, before we scale this up to 5 teams or 10 teams or 100 teams, we need to solve those and then teach those folks how to do that. And so essentially you are experimenting with the process, and then you're using evidence to invest more in the change over time. And I think that is an effective way to de-risk the change and move this process forward in a responsible way.
I like it. A question that's come through is, do you recommend tools, any tools for using OKRs?
Look, generally speaking, I try to stay tool agnostic. I want to, you should work on the tools, work with the tools that make sense for you. I think in the early days, everybody starts with a Google Sheet or an Excel or something along those lines, right? Yeah. I think as an organization starts to get bigger and manage multiple teams, I think tools like Workboard are an excellent place to start. We got to train people in the tools. We got to get them to use them. But the nice thing about tools like Workboard is they scale. They connect the dots for everybody in the organization. They drive transparency. They reduce ambiguity. I mean, I worked with this one organization where I think it was a 10,000 person organization, and they were literally emailing around Excels. And only the people who got those Excels knew what was going on with this other team. Right. It's chaos with 10,000 people. And so, yeah, I think tools like Workboard are nice because they give you that org-wide transparency, how things connect, is there duplication of effort, et cetera. And so I think that's a good way to go in a larger organization.
Thanks. So the final question I've got for you, because we're getting close to the end of time. So I'm going to put you on the spot and say, if you're walking into an organization and they're asking you about moving to the OKR framework, what's your pitch to the leaders of that organization why they should take OKRs on?
Yeah. So the general pitch is, and I said it before, right? You're building a software business, whether you think that or not, right? A lot of folks are like, no, I'm in banking. No, you're building a bank on top of a software company. That's how we build businesses today. So you're in the software business. Software is continuous, right? The manufacturing measures of success of delivering output don't make sense in this world anymore. We talked about this before. The only meaningful measure of change that reflects the real world uncertainty and unpredictability of digital product development is behavior change. And by changing our measures of success to behaviors, we actually encourage a culture of customer centricity, a culture of empathy, and a culture of agility. That's my pitch.
And I like it.
Yeah.
And that brings us pretty close to the end, Jeff. So it's been fantastic to have you on at Talking Remote again. And I think you're in Barcelona at the moment. Is that right?
I am.
So he's having a wonderful time there, surrounded by fantastic food.
True. And
so-
the sea.
So I thank you greatly for taking the time from that side of the world to talk to me on this side of the world.
Love it.
It's fantastic to have you on. If you're watching this show, all the things will be in the show notes, the things that Jeff has talked about. Check out his blogs. Also, don't forget remoteaf.co. Click the community button. You'll see lots more of these. Don't hesitate. Now, we've got this on podcast as well. So if you go to YouTube and click the podcast button, you can listen to Jeff's dulcet tones. Jeff, it's been fantastic to have you on at Talking Remote today.
My pleasure, Tony. Thanks so much for having me again. It's been fun.